All right, we are live here with a Schloss Rant NFL season preview 2023. We got the Lions and the Chiefs. They're going to be kicking off Thursday night. It's Labor Day. It's a tradition unlike any other, except this year we are adding in a couple new different things to the mix. We're going to do this in two parts. One here is going to drop today, Labor Day. And we're going to give you an angle to look at for every one of the 32 NFL teams. And then we'll jump in part two, probably get posted right before kickoff, maybe around Wednesday, maybe even tonight. Not sure. Still working on that. But that one will have the typical Schloss Rant stuff. It'll have your division picks, your wild card picks, your under, overs, more in-depth breakdown of the Giants, but I will talk about them here today in part one. And we'll also go through the top 5 players in the National Football League. So we're going to start first here. We're going to give 1 to 2, maybe even 3 looks, depending on how my notes are, of different angles for different plays you can go ahead and put in on each of the 32 teams in the National Football League. So we're going to start 100 miles up I-95 with the New York Jets. And we know this team has been talked about as much as anyone with Hard Knocks, with Aaron Rodgers, with Robert Saleh running the bleachers, all right? And there's a lot of hype around them. There's no doubt. You bring in a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, all the success he's had, of course, you're going to be bound to be talked about. But for the Jets, and this is going to sting a lot of you, give me the under 9.5 at -105 for your Jets, Jets. And the reason behind this is simple. Aaron Rodgers didn't play as well as he has historically in his last year with Green Bay. You could tell me he wanted to get out of the Packers. He wasn't into that situation anymore. You can tell me that all you want. But it doesn't seem like anyone wants to remind us that Rodgers had his worst year probably since his rookie year, all the way back in 2008. He's going to be frustrated this year if his offensive tackles, Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown, are unable to block for him, and he's getting injured, and he's getting knocked to the ground, and he's getting his face smashed in. He's not going to like that. He's going to pout and moan on the sidelines. Not going to be good. The head coach, what has he shown me in the National Football League? Not much. You know, you won 7 games last year. You were 7-4 at one point, and you lost 6 straight to close out the year. I understand the quarterback situation was less than ideal, but he's got to show me that. So the combination of the coaching and the questionable, at best, offensive line play, give me the Jets under 9.5 wins. All right, let's go up to Western New York with the Buffalo Bills. Over 10.5, and I promise these are not going to be all unders and overs, but a lot of them, that's just the play. I'm not trying to get out of control here. And look, it's sitting at -150. We know Josh Allen is a great regular season quarterback. He's good enough for 11 wins, period, stop. Last year, this team dealt with a lot. Snowstorms, DeMar Hamlin nearly dying on the fields. That presented a lot of challenge for the team. But they still went 13-3 because they only played 16 games. Still made it to the playoffs. Still won a game. You're going to tell me they're going to regress to 10 wins? I don't think so. Over 10.5 for the Buffalo Bills. Going down to the 6th borough of New York City, the Miami Dolphins. That's right, the 6th borough of New York City. Tyreek Hill. This one's a bit of a long shot. These are not necessarily stuff that I'm saying is a lock, but it's just different ways to play this so you're not doing the same under and overs and different stuff. But Tyreek Hill at +2,000 for Offensive Player of the Year. All right, this is an award that doesn't always go to a quarterback. It usually doesn't. If Tua can stay healthy, Hill can go bonkers. You can also look at Hill at +100 for 100 or more receiving yards in 8 or more games. Here's the thing with Tyreek Hill. With one pass, one slant route, one sluggo, slant and go, he can take the ball to the house. He can go 60, 70, 80 yards with the ball with ease. So that's why I like those particular plays there. All right, it was going to be +100 for the 100 or more receiving yards in 8 or more games. I want to make sure that's clarified. All right, and the last team in the AFC East, the New England Patriots, +245 for the playoffs. Not saying they're going to win the division. I think that's probably Buffalo's to win. But this team now has real coaches. You're not looking at Joe Judge and Matt Patricia trying to get the offense organized, right? They got real coordinators. Mac Jones must have shown something for them to release Bailey Zappi, or whatever his name is, Zapko, whatever his name is. I like this number, especially with 3 wildcards. So the AFC East, to summarize this here, under 9.5 wins at -105 for your Jets, over 10.5 wins at -150. A lot of juice there with the Bills. The Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, plus 2,000 for Offensive Player of the Year. 100 or more yards receiving in 8 games at even money, plus 100. And the Pats, plus 245 to make the playoffs. That is your AFC East. Flipping the page, and I wrote this down old school style with a pen and a notebook. Up to the AFC North, the Ravens. This one I'm playing in a kind of an interesting way, but we're going to go to win exactly 11 games at plus 550. You've got a committed Lamar Jackson, meaning that if he's got somewhat of an injury, he's going to play because he got paid. All right? So I think they won 10 games last year. I think Jackson being healthy all year can definitely add a win. It's a bit of a long shot, but again, if they go 11-5, you can hedge. Or if they're 10-6, you're in a position where you can hedge as well. I don't think anyone thinks they're winning more than 12 games. I also don't think anyone thinks they're winning less than 10. It seems like with John Harbaugh coaching this team, that's usually about right where they're going to be. So I think this is a good spot where you can nail it right at 11 wins at plus 550 and take a look at hedging if they're at 10-6 or at 11-5. The Cleveland Browns, plus 115 to make the playoffs. If Watson can play well and Myles Garrett, who is about as good of a player in the National Football League, including the quarterbacks, yes, he's as good as any of those quarterbacks are, and I know that's tough to compare. You've got elite talent at 2 of the most important positions on the field, quarterback and that, linebacker, defensive end, depending whether you're playing a 3-4 or a 4-3. A guy who's going to rush the quarterback no matter what. That's Myles Garrett. And he's not just a guy who you're taking off the field and run plays because, look at him. He's an Adonis. He's 6'6", 270, 275. That guy's ripped. So they're set there. And if you also like Myles Garrett as much as I do, you look at him at plus 800 for Defensive Player of the Year. That Defensive Player of the Year award, it's usually going to a pass rush type of player. Think J.J. Watt, think T.J. Watt. It's going to maybe a cornerback. Think Stephon Gilmore. Those are the players who it's going to. You don't need to worry about safeties and interior defensive linemen and middle linebackers getting those awards because that's not who it's going to. So I like that value there. Steelers at minus 155 to miss the playoffs. Everyone's talking about how Kenny Pickett played down the stretch. He improved. He showed moxie. But I think there's just too much talent, too much competition within the AFC. And it doesn't mean that they're going to, go 6-11 or 7-10. But I think that the AFC just has too much talent, too many players at the quarterback position for me to have them making the playoffs. Even Denver, who won 5 games last year, their D is really good, and Russell Wilson's bound to be better. So if you want to take that as one of the wild card teams, possibly, the Steelers at minus 155 to miss the playoffs is a way to look at this. All right, to the Bengals, the king of the jungle here. This is another team that it's hard to find an angle. All right, is Joe Burrow healthy? Yeah, probably. He's going to play in week 1. But you can't even say that with this team they need to get over the hump because they've been to the Super Bowl. They've been to an AFC title game. Burrow's only been healthy for 2 full years. All right, this is his 3rd year where he's going to be fully healthy and starting. And I know there was some doubt about his health, but you get what I mean. He was out 2020 for most of his rookie year. And the only teams, or really the only player to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs was Tom Brady in 18, Tom Brady in 20. And Burrow, they beat Mahomes in that 2021 AFC title game. So I think Burrow is either the 2nd or the 3rd best quarterback in the league. Mahomes is obviously number 1. So the angle that we're going to play here after all this rambling is over 10.5 wins, because if Burrow's going to be healthy, this team's going to get there. They're going to win 11 games. There's no doubt in this man, Joe Burrow, how good of a player he is. So give me over 10.5 for the Cincinnati Bengals division in the sport. No one really likes any of the team except for maybe the Jaguars. But let's start with the Titans. I got the Titans actually at plus 300 to win the division. Last year they collapsed. All right, they only won 7 games. The year before that, they were the number 1 seed in the AFC. This team can still make the playoffs. This team can still win the division. I don't know what you're going to get from Tannehill. I don't know what you're getting from Malik Willis. I don't know if Levis is going to step in place of the quarterback. Is kind of up in the air. But this division just is not very good. And at plus 300, when everyone's really leaning into the Jacksonville Jaguars, I go the other way, and I say give the Tennessee Titans at plus 300 to win the division. Texans. I don't really want to spend much time talking about the Texans. They're in that rebuilding mode with Stroud, and I know they got that big pass rusher from Alabama, Will Anderson, where they went 2-3. But give Dameon Pierce at plus 650 for 10 or more rushing yards. He had 4 last year. I know it's a little low, but the lead back. Someone's got to put the ball in the end zone. You know he's going to get the rock. You know they loved what they saw from him. I mean, he carved and cut up the Giants in that November game, at MetLife Stadium. So I like that angle. That's enough time talking about the Texans. Next, Colts over 7.5, alternate total at plus 155. Listen, if Shane Steichen, the offensive coordinator from the Philadelphia Eagles, now the head coach with the Colts, if he can institute an offense similar to what he did where they're relying on the quarterback taking off and running like he did with Jalen Hurts, and I understand he's the head coach, all right, but if he can get similar, I'm not saying identical because Hurts was in his 3rd year, his 2nd year really manning the controls, but if he can get similar type of production, maybe get 3,200 passing yards, maybe get, 600-700 yards rushing, I think they can win 8 games. Finish 8-9. The division's a joke. We've already talked about it. And honestly, first-year head coaches have had a lot of success in that first year. I'm not saying that Steichen's going to be amazing, but let's just off the top of my head, a couple of minutes ago, we're writing this down. Last 20 years or so, Mangini, Ben McAdoo with the Giants, Todd Bowles with the Jets won 10 games. Brian Daboll with the Giants last year won 9. McConnell last year with the Minnesota Vikings won 13 or whatever it was. The Colts have a legitimate shot to maybe break through that 7.5. And when looking at the all totals, I didn't want to go too high. I didn't want to go too low either, where you're not getting a number. So I thought over 7.5, where you're still getting a plus 155, I think is a nice little angle you can go ahead and take a look at with the Colts. All right, the Jaguars. This is the team everyone's high on. That they have that great comeback win in the playoffs, obviously, against the Chargers. But when you do it against the Chargers, who choke left and right, going back to 2006 with Marty Schottenheimer and that 14-2 team, I'm not really counting it as much. And, they lost to the Jets in 2009, I guess it was, with Sanchez there on the road. So, yeah, Chargers are not really a great playoff team, so people are taking what the Jags did and then playing the next week at the Chiefs, keeping them kind of at bay in that divisional round. The Chiefs have struggled with Mahomes in that divisional round. I mean, they struggled against the Texans, fell behind early. The Cleveland Browns gave them a run for their money the year after that. So Jacksonville, with an injured Mahomes, was able to keep the game close, so people are real high on the Jaguars. But having said that, I'm not taking a look at the wins. I'm not taking a look at the division for this team. I'm taking a look at Trevor Lawrence and that over 4,050.5 pass yards at minus 115. I think they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. I don't think their defense is much to write home about. If he gets to 4,100 yards, all he's doing is getting about 238, 239 a game. I think that's reasonable, and we know he has the talent. I mean, come on. Once you got Urban Meyer out of there, you got a real Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson. You definitely liked the result. So give me Trevor Lawrence over 4,050.5 pass yards at minus 115. Colts alternate win total over 7.5 plus 155. Texans plus 650. Dameon Pierce 10 or more rushing touchdowns, and the Titans plus 300 to win the division. That's your AFC South preview. All right, on to the AFC West. Broncos. Let's start with them. Disappointing year last year. Everyone knows that. Give me plus 180 for them to make the playoff. They can sneak in there with a wild card. They had a great defense, but now you've got a new head coach in there. You got a coach that's going to hold Russell Wilson's feet to the fire. You got a coach that's going to preach accountability. You got a coach that's won a Super Bowl. You got a coach that really, his teams are competitive. Even that stretch earlier in the last decade where they, won 7 games, I think 3 years in a row. They were fielding competitive rosters. And I think you bring Sean Payton, a guy who's confident is as a head coach, to make the decisions that Nathaniel Hackett struggled with. That was on display very early on, right from game 1, that Monday night game in Seattle, where they, ended up kicking like a 60-something yard field goal and mismanaging the clock every single which way. You're not going to have that with Sean Payton. So plus 180 to make the playoffs. The Chargers. Chargers are talented. We know that, all right? I'm not looking really at the wins. I'm not looking at the division. I'm looking at similar like I did with Trevor Lawrence, over 4,450 passing yards. It's boring, like I said, but 2 years ago, Herbert had over 5,000. Last year, he had 4,739. Kellen Moore's the new offensive coordinator. If you go back to his last full year with Dak Prescott in 2021, he had 4,449, so almost right to that number. But the caveat there is that Prescott only played 16 games that year. So I like Herbert to throw the ball all over the place and get over 4,450 pass yards. The Chiefs, this is about as square of a play as possible. It's a little bit of a long shot at the same time, but it is the favorite for this particular award, and Mahomes at plus 600 to win the MVP. Listen, the Chiefs don't always cover games. I think that's been well documented, all across the internet. This is about as square as it can be. I'm not really getting too crazy looking for angles for this team, but I think that anything you want to play on the over with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes, you go ahead and do that. So I like plus 600 here for Mahomes to win the MVP. And the last one is the Raiders. This is another quite a bit of a long shot. Plus 1,800 to be the last winless team. I think they want to go out and get Caleb Williams. And I think that, McDaniels is probably pretty secure within the role, even though he was disappointing last year. But they got off Carr, and I think he's going to be able to convince Mark Davis that, listen, you're paying coaches up the wazoo if they ever need to pay John Gruden, and I don't think he wants to fire him. So I think taking a look at that, he's okay if they're not necessarily successful, if they are the last team to win the game, because that'll put them in the best position going forward there to go out and get Caleb Williams. So Broncos plus 180 to make the playoffs. Chargers over 4,450 yards passing for Herbert. Mahomes plus 600 for MVP. And Raiders plus 1,800 for the last winless team. That is the AFC preview. We'll take a break. We'll come back with the NFC preview in just a bit.